Joining me right now on what has been, I think, an explosive day in the impeachment inquiry. We've used the word bombshell previously. Now we're on to explosive with Gordon Sondland, ambassador to the European Union, and his testimony. Joining me right now is Joan McCarter, who is senior political editor at Daily Kos, good friend of the show, and someone who has been covering it and writing about it, and will have lots to say. Welcome back, Joan.
I'm glad to be back.
So it was, you would agree with me, like this was one of those, like nobody knew what this guy was going to do. And I think it just kind of took this in a whole other direction, whether it affects what the Republicans do or not.
It does. I mean, we went into the day thinking he might even be ready to plead the fifth.
Right.
Say, nope, sorry, I'm not going to incriminate myself. Bye. And instead, he put them all in the mix. Everybody from Trump to Pompeo to Pence to Ron Johnson, the senator from Wisconsin. It was explosive, yes.
And in that regard, too, I mean, I didn't even think about how he would just drag everybody, Pompeo, Mulvaney, Ron Johnson, who's been in the middle of this for a while, but who kind of has tried to extricate himself through ridiculous ways. It was just kind of like really showing that this was a coordinated effort that used every lever, every major player, at least, focusing on Ukraine, to get this done. This wasn't about just Donald Trump's crazy phone call.
Not a bit. And it was clear that Sondland was really trying to save his own behind.
Oh, yeah.
His naivete about this. Well, it could have all been official, even though Rudy Giuliani was doing it, up until the point where he found out, oh, oops, it's not. I find that hard to believe.
Right. It was kind of what the same thing Kurt Volker tried to do yesterday, the special envoy to Ukraine, who was one of the Republicans' witnesses. And he certainly gave testimony that helped the Democrats. But this same line as Sondland, where they don't know what Burisma meant. Like, you never asked what Burisma was when the president wanted an investigation opened into Burisma, a strange company named Burisma.
Yeah, how could this obscure company be so significant to you? How could you care so much about corruption, quote unquote, in just this one company?
You wrote yesterday about the testimony and House Intelligence Committee Chair Adam Schiff, his closing remarks when he again talked about Trump's wrongdoing, underscored that Republicans aren't upset about the crimes. They're only upset that they got caught. He did that again today. I think he knows that this really resonates. Talk a little bit about your thoughts on that and why it's something that is really powerful.
It shows just how bankrupt the Republican Party has become, because it's absolutely true. We've seen the moving of the goalposts for Republicans. Even back to Lindsey Graham when all of this was first starting to come up. Well, if we find out there was a quid pro quo, if Trump was really withholding military aid to get this out of Ukraine, then we're all going to have a serious problem with it. But they don't. None of them do, and we've seen that over and over again. And we're at the point now, well, sure, he tried to do a crime, but it's okay because it didn't actually happen. Ukraine actually got the aid. So no harm, no foul. Doesn't matter. Not a crime. Doesn't count. That is shocking. It shouldn't be at this point with the Republican Party, but it shows just how morally bankrupt they really are. It's incredibly disturbing to me that they can. It goes back to Russia. All of this just sort of gobsmacks me. We have a foreign power interfering in our election, and that's okay. And now we have the president trying to get another foreign government to interfere in the next election, and that's just fine.
they've seen all of their talking points just, crumble. The process argument, they wanted to see testimony. Well, you got testimony. Now you've got hearings. They wanted the firsthand testimony, not the secondhand people. Well, they've got that. I mean, they see everything, crumbling. But as you point out, they're sticking to this, I guess, with the hope that as bad as it gets, as long as they can hold on to this hardcore base, they'll be okay. And I guess, and that's always been tenuous anyway, because, Trump's already lost a lot of people, and we see the surge, and certainly the support among progressives, the energy. But give me your thoughts on moving forward, just what you've seen here, and expecting that we're probably going to see more testimony that's damning, how this is going to play out for Republicans before we even talk about what they might do regarding impeachment, how it plays out politically for them.
I think it plays out disastrously for them politically, and this is what I'm having a hard time seeing entirely. It could be that they are all afraid enough of the base, afraid enough of Trump's rabid base, that they're all waiting until they're past primary deadlines in their own states to start turning. Because it's very hard to imagine that they're going to want to run in the general election with this on their back.
Right. And so,
I
that's
could
like
be
the
wrong,
beginning
and
of next year, right?
All the time, but it's there's still lots of deadlines coming up for primary races to be declared. So I think perhaps that's what Republicans are hanging with Trump until it's over. Making sure that they don't get a further right hardcore Trump or primary opponent if they happen to raise their voices against him. It's one of the reasons why I think we've seen so many retirements among Republicans.
And for these senators who are vulnerable, it's particularly fraught because they're being demanded to speak on it now. They're going to be looking at a trial in January, as you said. The primary deadlines are mostly coming like in March and April, right? And down the line.
Right.
So they're going to be forced. Susan Collins is going to be forced to vote on this, Cory Gardner, Tom Tillis, before they could face a primary challenger. Right.
And those three are all very vulnerable. And they're the three that keep saying, no, can't say anything. I'm a juror, so I can't say anything about this process, which is incredibly disingenuous on their part, too.
Right. And then you've got Ron Johnson, who's a juror, who's actually in the middle of all this.
Yes. Wouldn't it be fun if it'd be Christmas in November if Ron Johnson got so deep into this that he had to resign? I don't think it's going to happen, but boy, it would be fun.
Or at least recuse himself, although I don't know who would enforce that, and certainly he's not going to do it on his own.
Yeah. Ron Johnson, by the way, also has that Russia problem, too, having been a big recipient of NRA Russian laundered money in his last race. So,
right.
That's out there for Ron Johnson, too. I don't want to forget the Russia aspects of all of this, because if you really think about who most benefits by Ukraine being put in this very, very difficult position by Trump, it's Putin. As Nancy Pelosi said, all roads lead back to Putin.
Absolutely. And the fact that the money was released on September 11th to Ukraine it's now become clear, and every day of testimony shows it, because of the whistleblower. And if not for the whistleblower, we might have seen the president of Ukraine go on CNN and say they're opening an investigation into Biden, and Trump still not give the money. That's what Ambassador Bill Taylor thought, because in the end, that's what Russia really would want. Yeah. Which is pretty extraordinary.
That's an important point, though, too, the release date and the whistleblower. When we go back to some of today's testimony and what Republican members of Congress were trying to focus on, what Trump indeed with his handwritten notes that he stood in front of the cameras with this afternoon. No quid pro quo. I didn't ask for anything. That was the phone conversation he had with Sondland after we already knew about the whistleblower, after we already knew about the withheld aid. So Republicans want to keep pointing that out, but they don't want to they don't want to remember the timeline of this. So that conversation between Sondland and Trump happened once we already knew that the whistleblower was there.
Right. Meanwhile, there's so much else going on that is swirling around this. The House passed a continuing resolution yesterday to keep the government funded until December 20th. Tell us a bit more about the threat of a shutdown in the middle of all this and the pressure on the Senate and Trump to pass it.
I think there's mostly pressure on the Senate to get this done at this point. Funding runs out as of midnight tomorrow night. The Senate should have taken it up today. There was some discussion about them taking it up today, but apparently there's some procedural arcane problem, parliamentary, with the shell of a bill that the House used to pass it yesterday. The House tried to change the structure for the bill, this shell that they were using, but Republican Chip Roy of Texas figured out what they were doing and blocked them from doing that. So they had to pass the resolution, send it over to the Senate, knowing that there could be a procedural problem there. And indeed there was. So the Senate is going to pick another vehicle to pass, hopefully the same bill where they won't be fighting over it. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow morning, but then it's got to go back to the House. So meanwhile, the House is trying to have these hearings in the Intelligence Committee. Big news. They have to keep breaking that so that they can go to the floor to do these votes to pass continuing resolution again to get it onto Trump's desk to sign by midnight tomorrow, which he may or may not do, depending on how much he's raging about impeachment.
Right. Wow. You also write about the report that in a closed-door meeting of House Democrats, Nancy Pelosi said that Mitch McConnell told her recently, "I'm not going to do anything that President Trump doesn't want me to do." Tell me your thoughts on McConnell's continued loyalty to Trump, even as we're, again, in the middle of all this and all this is coming out.
It's unfathomable to me, knowing the vulnerability his Senate majority is in, but he's sticking with Trump for now. At a certain point, maybe he gets all of the judicial nominations that he wants passed through the Senate and all of those seats filled, and that will be it for him, and he can let Trump go. But as of now, I think he sees his future tied to Trump, and I don't entirely understand why. Perhaps it's something to do with his spouse's employment as the Secretary of Transportation. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Especially after Kentucky, right? Especially after Matt Bevin.
Yeah.
I know everybody's saying, well, the other races in Kentucky, but nonetheless, that shouldn't have happened. And even what happened in Louisiana and even the closeness in Mississippi by a single digit, the Republican won the governor's race.
Right. You would think he would be a little bit more insecure about this than to tell Nancy Pelosi in private, well, yeah, I'm not doing anything Trump tells me not to. And I think it's pretty much a given. It's everything, even after today's testimony as it stands, if this was in front of the Senate tomorrow, they would quit, no question. There's not going to be that many Republican defections.
How have you felt about how Pelosi has handled all of this? Early on, all of us were pressuring for the impeachment inquiry, and she was, staying firm, no impeachment inquiry, claiming it would hurt Democrats, claiming it would help Republicans. She changed her mind. She announced the impeachment inquiry, and ever since, it's been full speed ahead, or maybe not. What are your thoughts?
I think it has been full steam ahead. It's hard to know. There's the talk that, okay, well, we're just going to see where this leads us. We're going to follow the paths, but at the same time we're hearing, no, we have to end this by Christmas. Because we know maybe they think what we've heard on Ukraine is enough to get the job done, but we know that there's so much more out there, including everything from the Mueller report and all of the threads that they're following with Roger Stone and all of the things that are happening in the Southern District of New York. There's a lot going on. I can see not wanting to go into 2020, not wanting to go into the election year with this, but I would rather see it play out. I would rather see everything uncovered. Pelosi, I think I was very frustrated with her. I was one of the ones clamoring for impeachment now, or for at least a change in messaging from her, because I think the things that she was saying, like, well, he'll self-impeach, he's his own worst enemy, was all true, but it was very frustrating to hear because, no, you can't self-impeach. The House has to act.
And it was also giving talking points as well to the Republicans when she kept saying, like, this will help the Republicans in the election when we knew better.
And you know, we've seen the poll numbers all along. The numbers for impeaching and removing are growing all the time. So impeachment's not an unpopular thing. It's not going to make Democrats unpopular, and we saw that, in fact, just a couple of weeks ago in Virginia and in races around the country. So I have some lingering frustration with her, and I have some questions how much she is still listening to the New Democrat or Blue Dog Democrat wing of the party. But we've gotten this point. I think Adam Schiff is handling this very well.
Yes.
So I'm somewhat appeased.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll see where it all goes. Joan, great to have you on the program. Always great to speak with you, and I want to thank you for coming on today.
You are most welcome. It was great to do.
Joan McCarter, Daily Kos senior political writer, at Joan McCarter on Twitter, at Joan McCarter, MC, capital Carter. We're back in a couple of minutes.
The Michelangelo Signorile Show.
SiriusXM.